Welcome to the Derek Loudermilk Show. This is episode 401 with Amrit Sandhu. Amrit is the host of the popular Inspired Evolution podcast and is Mind Valley's head trainer for the Australia Pacific region. The main focus of his work is on meaning and mental health, and we're going to hear lots of amazing stories today, including interesting stories from his travels around the world. He's actually one of the few people who's been to more countries than I have, and things that he learned in his home country of Australia and in Brazil. You'll learn how to find out what your main values are and how to live in alignment of those values, and pay attention because you'll learn what the opposite of depression is and how to get there. So without further ado, here is Amrit Sandhu. Amrit Sandhu, welcome to the show.
Oh, Derek, brother, it is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, good to see you again. It's been 5 months since I was on your show, and you're down in Australia, so we have the time difference. So I'm happy we made it work today.
Absolutely. It doesn't feel like 5 months. It feels like it was just a couple of weeks ago. So I guess time does fly when you're having fun.
Yeah, time has been especially weird feeling lately. So we were just chatting beforehand about some of the things that you're into recently, and you mentioned the gene keys, and that's been on my list to look into. Like, what is it? I've had other friends that have like gone through the gene keys process, and they're like, "Oh, you'll love it," but I really have no idea what it is.
Yeah. Oh man, it's a big open-ended question, that one. I recently just did a podcast with Richard Rudd, who is do I call him the founder of the Gene Keys? From in a Muggle sense, looking from the outside in, he is the founder of the Gene Keys. But I don't think he would use that languaging. I think he would call himself something along the lines of the conduit for the Gene Keys. You probably wouldn't use the word channel though. So the Gene Keys, a lot of people that are Gene Keys fans, let's start there, are also human design fans. Do you know a little bit about human design?
Yeah, that's just the side I'm more familiar with.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. So Richard Rudd was part of that ecosystem. And then through his own work, and he received some transmissions, the Gene Keys basically came to birth. It's based loosely on the Tao Te Ching, has the 64 sort of characteristics. And of those 64 characteristics, he's basically modernized them, I would say, and made him much more relatable, applicable. And so the easy place to start is you go across to the Gene Keys website and you get your hologenetic profile. You put in basically your birth date and your name, and out pops your profile. And you get there at the moment, there are 3 activation sequences. One is based on prosperity, and one is based on love, and one is based on purpose. Obviously, being a purpose coach myself, the purpose was the one that sort of drew me there. And subsequently, prosperity was one that we did, and love has been the one that I've been working with. And so all of that has then culminated into, actually, this is, for me, my experience has been beyond profound in being invested in the Gene Keys work. And yeah, that just led me to becoming a guide and a coach, a Gene Keys guide and coach. Now, what it's based on, I guess, is astrology, because you pump in your date and it gives you a reading. And I laughed because I'm not so much scoffing at the Gene Keys, I'm scoffing more at myself, because I just never thought I would be a coach or a guide for something that is astrology based. Like, even now I find that hard to wear. It's like, I'm an engineer by qualification, by practice. In many ways, I break things down, I reconstruct them. I do the same thing in my leadership coaching. It's like, what's not working? What are the elements? What are the parts? You bring it back to first principle, cull things down, and then rebuild something, better, more powerful, more effective, stronger. So yeah, when you start going, oh, but it's astrology, and but the the hook, line, and sinker fact is once you get your hologenetic profile, you read through your first 4 keys on your purpose, and every single person that I facilitated this work for, it's just you watch them, and because obviously they do their profile, and I'm in a call with them, not too dissimilar to how you and I are doing this over Zoom, and you just watch their face, and they're just like, oh my god, that's me. That's me. And you're just watching the pennies drop, and you're like, yeah, it's incredible that an online tool, and this is what makes it even more eerie for me. It's like it's an online tool where I plug in my date and I get this incredible amount of self-awareness pointed right back at me based on the wisdom from the Tao Te Ching. So yeah, that's a quick little synopsis of and I've left heaps out.
What does that say about like determinism versus free will? Like if a map of your birth can tell you so much about who you are, it seems like a lot of pre-programming.
Yeah. So the way the Gene Keys approaches it, it's beautiful, yeah. So it's not telling you what you're here to do as much as what lessons, I would say, you're here to learn. Yeah. And so at the heart of the Gene Keys is this art called the art of contemplation. And like I said, I was just interviewing Richard Rudd on my podcast the other day, and this is the beautiful book that he's written called The Art of Contemplation. Very short book. It's about 80 pages, but the actual crux of it is about 45. So there's, I don't want to say there's not much to it. There's a lot to it. You're invited to contemplate your keys in a sequence, right? And the keys definitely unlock something within you. So we were discussing before this, gentleness is not one of the keys. It's one of the pillars of the Gene Keys. And I've been sort of contemplating gentleness. But let's say, at the moment, one of my keys is purpose. One of my purpose keys has a shadow of obscurity, has a gift of like clarity, and has a siddhi of light. Yeah, so there's always a shadow, a gift, and a siddhi. And so in terms of breaking that down a little bit, the shadow is kind of, where you get stuck on things. Obviously, I think shadow people understand a little bit, but that shadow also has a gift. So if things are obscure and you get obscure, but then also the gift to that, if you focus on it, can be clarity. It's like if you're always sifting through obscurity, like that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense. What you're scavenging for is clarity, right? So that's the gift that you represent. But then there's this siddhi, which is almost like this. When you tune into the Vedas, that word means like the
like miracles,
like the
right?
the elevated energy of that, right? So it's like in spirit land, what that would mean. So the way I look at it is like sort of the 3 dimensions. It's like the challenges we have, the gifts that we have, and sort of the spiritual aspect. Now that's not how Richard sort of describes it, but that's how I look at it. So the spiritual action like aspect of it is light. So I sort of take that as, okay, so if I can get clearer, I'll feel lighter. Yeah. But there's a whole bunch of other spiritual connotations to light, but this is just one of my keys, right? So you have a whole set of keys around stuff. So I think I was describing the shadow, the gift, and the siddhi, and the siddhi being like the elevator version, the gift kind of being the gift that you bring into this 3D reality, the world, and the shadow being the challenges that you sort of face in this world. So like I was saying for one of mine, it's obscurity, clarity, and then the light. And so in there, it's like, what am I obscured? Like, what is obscured from me? How do I come across as obscured? Like, where do things, something I'm going to continue to focus on as an intention for a while. If you're an intentional person, that you've been living with intention for quite some time, and what that looks like is I program most of my coaching clients every year. We set an intention. What's your intention for this year? Yeah. And I feel like goals are a bit archaic in that way. Goals are important. It's definitely important to have what I call milestones rather than goals, because you definitely need to achieve things on your way towards stuff. But when you set a goal, it's like having a horse with blinkers on. Yeah. You're sort of very focused, but you don't allow like life is a mystery. There's so much open to it that it can really, surprise you in many ways. So rewinding back, because your question is actually about determinism, but I'm sort of going into the mechanics of the Gene Keys here. But yeah, fundamentally, if you're carrying intentions, like now you get the opportunity to carry that particular key as your intention, and you've got 3 layers to it. you spend about 10% focusing on your shadow, 90% focusing on, what is my gift? So my purpose is clarity. What do coaches afford people? Greater clarity in life, right? So it tells you how and what your gifts are. It doesn't tell you how to apply them. I could be providing clarity as an engineer, right? In terms of, okay, I could be a design engineer, like I'm getting really clear designs out into the world. I could, there's so much that with the purpose of clarity that I could be affording people. Now, for me, coaching is all about clarity and communication, but that's my ethos in coaching as well. It doesn't have to be everybody's, right? So even as a speaker, that's what I try to aim for, is how can I help people like become even more clear on who they are, what their obstacles are, what the next step is, and that's the approach that I've got. So Gene Keys won't necessarily, if you've got that sort of qualm about like it's all fated and I don't believe in that, it's not going to tell you this is exactly what you need to go do. What it is going to tell you is like in this lifetime, it is likely that your challenges, your gifts, and your calling is associated with this particular frequency, this particular energy, this body of work. And like I said, it's been beyond profound for me. Every time I've guided someone through this process, they've gone, oh my God, yeah. But it's way less 3D than, okay, like, the Myers-Briggs or something. It's like, you're going to be an astronaut and you're going to be a marketer. It's definitely not like that. Yeah.
And so this, excuse me, this gentleness, I haven't ever really spent much time thinking about that, but what is that meant for you?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So within the Gene Keys, inquiry is one of the pillars. Patience is one of the pillars. Gentleness is one of the pillars. And that's because within the art of contemplation, when you're contemplating, those are kind of the pillars of where you need to take the time to be patient with the contemplation. You can contemplate something for, like I said, if you set an intention for a year, like you can contemplate something for a year. Yeah, it's probably worth describing what contemplation looks like then. But you need to have that sense of inquiry as well, that curiosity in terms of, okay, what is this for me? Like, what am I obscure? Like we were talking about obscurity before, like what's staying obscure? Where am I coming from? Like all these different avenues and aspects of it. There's got to be that inquiry to it. But the one that's really opening up for me at the moment is gentleness, touchwood, and that's just something that I've been focused on. So just before we dive into gentleness, let's talk about contemplation and what that looks like. Now, there's, loosely speaking, there's multiple like spiritual paths. There's one of which is, in the West we sort of look towards prayer a lot more, and sort of, things could be better. I'm going to call in, looking to an external force to sort of align with that and praying towards something. In the East, they have this yogic approach, which is like, I am everything and I can be better. And then in that, as I experience better, the world becomes better. And it's this, there's this very like Father in heaven, me here, versus I am yogic and I am one and connected. And these are the two sort of, you look around the different religions, different spiritual paths, there's, those are the kind of two main sort of approaches that we have towards deeper spiritual inner alignment work. I would just call it that for now. But the art of contemplation I have found really useful because it's something I felt like I was always doing. So simple things like I was always like listening to, like recently, a very close friend of mine lost his beloved, to unfortunate circumstances. And so this concept of death has been very close. And what I find myself doing is, just research, like I'll read the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Dying. Yeah. Then I'll read the Tibetan Book of the Dead because it's a body work on that. And then I'll just start researching this particular concept almost because I can feel there's an edge there. Like I have this anxiety around death a little bit. So it's like, okay, let's go there, and then researching, people that have given their lives for causes. And then I start to sort of ruminate on this bit, exactly that. Yeah. But instead of welcome, on the art of contemplation, it's also just sitting with something and being present to where you're at in that sort of story that you're looking to unpack. So, and the beauty of it is I could be thinking about where am I obscure, where am I clear, and where am I, where's light when I'm filling in the gas at the gas tank. Yeah, I can do that at a stoplight. I could be doing that in the time that I'm, waiting for the internet to kick back in when it glitches out, right? I can do that while I'm going for a walk. I can do that while I'm going for a run. I can do that post meditation, like when I just pop out of my meditation and there's that, 10 odd minute window where you're sort of reintegrating and it's like, oh yeah, that's currently my contemplation. What have I learned around these things? So I find, especially in today's modern world where we're required to be these 3D warriors, where we're kind of, here, there, and everywhere and trying to, be the parent and be the son and be the friend and be the employee and be the employer and we're in so many different places at so many given times that oftentimes we don't get the opportunity to just stay connected to our prayer. Yeah. Like it's maybe for 15 minutes a day I get the opportunity to do that, and my meditation maybe I get an hour a day to do that. Yeah, but with the art of contemplation I can carry the body of work that's alive within me everywhere I go all the time. And I think a lot of us are generally on this path are generally doing that anyway. Those of us that are, I don't want to use the word woke, I've used the air apostrophes woke, but um, spiritually inclined, I'll probably use that as a friendly term, are generally doing that anyway. But this gives you an opportunity to sort of go, okay, it's the art of contemplation. Now, gentleness being one of the pillars of that has been really present for me. Let's be honest. So the key thing in there is, everybody has this inner voice in their head. And again, I'm pointing the finger at everybody. I've got a really harsh inner critic. Yeah, call it being a Virgo, call it being a perfectionist, call it being whatever. But I notice these places where it's like, oh, and you did that again, or oh, come on, man, like, really? And even as much as I'm coaching so many other people, with compassion, with love and care, it's so much easier to afford the other compassion and care. And it's been the first time in a long time that an intention has emerged in my system, because usually I allow things to emerge from within, but an intention has emerged from outside. And what I mean by that is, I was watching my wife play with my son. We were talking about children before this. I was watching my wife play with my son and the mother and the child. And I could just see that it was somewhat foreign to me, but I could see how valuable it was. Yeah, not that I'm the most rugged man. I wouldn't go as far as saying that, but I could just see that there was this real value in gentleness, and there's an edge for me there. So I've adopted it on. And recently, what it's like myself, and that's really what it's like inside. Now, that might seem like a pretty small thing for some people tuning in. For other people, like a little example would be something like, okay, I was running a retreat 3 weeks ago, and I walked out, like there's a bit of a walk from the dorms down to the temple space. So I walked down to the temple space, and I've left my water bottle back up in my dorm. And we're sitting in meditation for a long time. You need your water bottle. And normally it's like, bang. Damn it, man. Like, you had an empty hand. Like, why didn't you get your water bottle? Like, yeah, it was like, why didn't you, it's like that conversation with yourself. Like, why didn't you, like, you let me down, And it was like, but with the gentleness, it was like, oh, you forgot it, didn't you? You left it out there. We got to go for a walk. Okay. And it's just that subtle difference, right? It's like this, like, but I'm approaching even like, I can hear the inner narrative that wants to go, bagunk, like, dude, you fucked up. And it's like, but no, you didn't really. Like, it's just, you forgot. And if we go really to the heart of what that transpires into, is, it's going to sound super cheesy, but that age-old saying, like, you can only really love others as much as you love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed that, especially as a parent, when you've lack of sleep, lack of resources, like, you start to become really compromised after a while. Like, your resilience comes down a little bit. And it's also an uncertain time in the world. There's been a lot. And I find when I've left with little resilience, I can come across as quite edgy. Just because I'm tired, I'm exhausted, especially like 10:30 at night after you've been up 5 a.m. coaching people from all the different time zones. You're a little bit like, and oftentimes my wife will ask me a question and she'll get a very short, blunted answer when really that's the most important person, touch wood, in my life. Yeah. But I've spent all this energy everywhere else in the rest of the day, and it's just like, yep, it's just there. Or, she's lost her water bottle, maybe. Let's just take that as an example, which is not what's happened, but she's lost her water bottle. It's like, I don't know, where could you have put it? But I can realize what I quickly started to realize was I'm speaking to her because she's so intimate with me in the same tone, voice that I use to speak to myself inside. Right? Because there is no barriers between me and the other, right? Like in those intimate relationships we have with our partners, with our parents, we speak to them exactly how we speak to ourselves, right? But those are the most important relationships. Like when I rock on a podcast with Derek here, I'm super polite, I'm super lovely. Of course I am, right? Because I'm meeting a stranger. But isn't it ironic that I spend least of my time with you, right? But I'm most polite to you. Yeah. And so in that, recoding myself for gentleness so that when I interface with inside, I'm much more gentle with myself, so that when I land with those people that I'm most intimate with, they get the most gentle version of me as well, because that is what's most supportive for them. It's a bit of a journey and a story, but it's quite profound. It has a massive impact on how you navigate your world.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's making me think of the tension that I have with my 6-year-old son. It usually boils down to me wanting to push him faster than he's ready to go, like physically, or like,
yeah,
you can stick to this task a little bit longer, I think. And he's like, he's a sensitive kid, and he's a lot of times it's too much, but I have the inner narrative of like the view of myself of like, you're just really good at doing hard things, you have a lot of grit, like everything is easy because of all the other hard things you've done. And obviously that's not his experience, so I'm like overlaying this identity of my own toughness onto what I would expect from him.
Yeah, can I dive in there a little bit? So if I was, and this is definitely not appropriate for me to do so because I don't have your permission, but I'm just going to go there for a second. Hopefully that's okay. But if I was to coach you into gentleness there, right? Just I would add the awareness that it's the mother's role to nest up super hard. Yeah. And it's the father's role to build in competency super hard. Yeah. So you see this in the archetypes. Like the mother's like, no, don't go out. You don't need to go out this evening. And the dad's like, let him go. It's like this. And that's the thing. So the mother is very, very coddling, right? And that's the energy of the mother. The lioness will fight the lion to save the cub. Yeah. So the mother's awareness is, hey, I love you so much. And there's a big bad world out there. Stay put, like stay here, like I got you, don't worry. Yeah. And the father's role is, hey, there's a big bad world out there and we're not always going to be here, and you need to learn how to deal with that. Right. So let's build some skills, let's fall over, get some cuts, get some bruises, because that'll make you even more competent, and you're my progeny, off you go. Right. So understanding the juxtaposition between those two things, then it goes, right, okay, I realize that I'm different and my son's different, but then also this is just part of the role. Yeah. So I'm being pushy because that's what the role requires me to do, because I want him to be competent, and I'm just loving him the way that fathers have loved sons and daughters since ever. Yeah. And then that allows, again, a little bit more gentleness, just going, oh, I'm doing it wrong, or he's doing it wrong. It's like, well, because you didn't say that, but in your opinion, he's doing it right for him and you're doing it right for him. But then there's still that disconnect. But even that disconnect has a beauty in it, and there's a gentleness that can be afforded in there.
So with pushing someone, especially a son, there's the gentleness might be in like, it's okay for him to not enjoy being pushed because ultimately it's to his benefit, you mean? And it's like, it's okay to be a little uncomfortable with that tension. Is that what you're suggesting?
Oh man, I definitely, and this is again I definitely haven't mastered parenting, bro. I'm 15 months into this journey and I'm just learning as I go. So, in terms of, and with my son, it's, yeah, at the moment, I think we go through phases, is my sort of humble awareness. At the moment, he's in a very, like, needing his mother nurturing sort of phase before the ages of 2 to 3. There's an amazing author here, actually Australian, called Steve Biddulph. He's written some really incredible books on parenting. And he talks about how between the ages of 0 and 0, 3, 0, 5, 0, 6, depending on different genders and different childs and different orientations, the child belongs to the mother. And it's up, and I get why they need that nurturing. So depending on how old the child is, it's like, hey, like, it's okay. Like, and that's, it's an opportunity for me to learn from him and my wife to be more gentle, because that's what he needs right now. And that's why gentleness is so present for me. Right. But then there's a point in there where it flips between the ages of, let's just run with 5 or 6 and 14. They become the fathers. Right. So I'm speaking about sons now. Sons become the fathers. And so then it's more about, hey, how fast can you run? How high can you swim? How high can you, swing, soar? How deep can you swim? Like, it's, these sort of competency things. And then actually, interestingly, after that, he talks about how after the age of 14, they step into the realm of mentors. And there's a whole conversation about mentors in there. And how to select the right mentor, and how it's really important for the parents to have a sense of community around them, even as they're upbringing kids, which I look at nuclear families and how we grow up now. It's really hard. Like, none of my friends around me are having kids. It's just me and my wife. And so we're losing a sense of community, but we're also growing another sense of community, that people that have kids, which is fine, right? And thankfully our existing community is very open-minded, open-hearted. So they do the best they can, but they're just not going to empathize and understand us. But all that to say, but like, I need to foster that sense of community for the next 15 odd years, because when my son becomes an adult or approaches his teenage years, he's going to naturally get to that stage, which we all know, which is like, we've been there, right? It's like your wings start to feel really compressed in the nest. You're like, man, and you revolt, and you duck out at night, and you're taking your bicycle to go see girls and all this random stuff, like just all those things, right? So at that point in time, it's really healthy for them to have a mentor. And Steve articulates it this way, like, you actually talk poorly about the parents, but the parents can trust that even when he's talking poorly about me, it's in a really good light, if that makes sense. So it's like, I could say something like, oh, like someone might say about me, it's like, your dad has this real tendency to look at things from a spiritual perspective, which is great. But then at the same time, sometimes it's just about the everyday stuff. There's not meaning in everything. He's a purpose coach and he finds meaning in everything, and one of my friends could probably say that to him. And so, not everything's an existential crisis, mate. Like, you needing to figure out your career job is, your dad's probably going to be like, what does it mean for you for the rest of your life? But maybe sometimes a job's just a job for the next, 18 months, and just see how it goes for you. So those little bits of where someone can actually poo-poo me and my philosophies and my thoughts, but also be respectful at the same time, but also give him the guidance that he needs. And having those relationships where I trust that person to be able to do that on my behalf. Because at the end of the day, there's only so much that you can do as a parent and as a mother and a father. So yeah, I definitely don't imagine that I have any answers when it comes to parenting. It's definitely been one of the biggest bodies of work I've ever approached. I have found there's a lot of growth that I've experienced in this space. But yeah, in terms of diffusing tension, I often lean back into what is my role in all of this? Like, what am I doing? And sometimes it's how I, Amrit, like, am personally showing up versus what the archetypal role of a father, like we were discussing before, requires me to show up as. And there may be a disconnect in there. I may be just sinking into the archetype really easily, or I may not be sinking into the archetype well enough. And in and around all of that, it's like, well enough, not doing, am doing, is so, like, you can be so critical of, I'm not manly enough, or I'm too manly, or I'm this, or I'm that. It's like, just be gentle with yourself, man. Like, you're you, massive project. Like, as an engineer, I was freaking out when I was having a kid, right? I had this one thought, which was like, this is the first project I'm going to start that actually, hopefully, I never get to see the end of. Normally you start a project, you finish it. You start a project, you finish it. And this was like, this is going to be a project I really hope I don't see the end of. Whoa. Like, I want to be gone before this project ends. And it's like, wow, what is that? How do you instill values? How do you instill virtue? And yeah, so space for gentleness in there. Hopefully that answers your question, but I acknowledge I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, no, that's a good reminder about the different phases. I have heard that too, like the Native Americans say, like, you stay with the mom until a certain age and then you go with the dad or with the men's group of the tribe. And my he's 6, so he's like right in that age where he's like he's getting a little more rambunctious and wanting to do more physical things, which is cool. But and then I'm thinking of like my favorite high school coach, when I was 14. I'm like, oh, this guy's different than my dad and he's super cool. And yeah, totally makes sense for sure. You mentioned milestones and then engineering, and you were thinking of like this be parenting as a project without an end, but like, is there a milestone that you have in mind with parenting right now?
With parenting, no, actually. Yeah, with parenting, no. I especially right now where we're at, because with my wife, like I said, it's very much he's in that mothering phase. So if I was to get anybody to set a milestone, it would be her, to really honor, acknowledge where he's at and where she's at. The way I sort of look at my role right now as the father is, before I was having my kid, I definitely saw these 2 circles, like mother, father, and this 3rd circle in between the 2, which was like the child. And now it's very different. I still see 3 circles, but there's the child, and then outside of that circle, encompassed within that circle, the mother is the little circle of the child. And then within that bigger circle, the mother is an even bigger circle called the father. And it's almost like these 3 circles sit outside of each other. So in order to have a connection to my child, I have found that it's not about me connecting to my son, like as much as I want to right now in this period of his life. He's his mother's son. Yeah. But my wife is the very important person that I can hold space for. And so, and that sounds super like, esoteric and philosophical, but it's as simple as like me making sure we got toilet paper in the house, we got the pantry stocked, we got the fridge stocked, like she's got tissues, she's got diapers, she's got on the Costco runs, like, this sort of stuff. Like, it's just the 3D stuff that, so when she needs something for the baby, it's at arm's length, right? And making sure she's got, every now and then time she gets chopped out to go get a massage so she feels okay, right? Because then she is she's MVP right now. She is 100% MVP, right? So as a coach, how do I enable my star player to do the role that she needs to do, right? And so, yes, I could set milestones for her, but the reality is she's MVP. She's more than competent. She needs to set up the milestones and go, hey, what are you targeting? What are you tracking towards? Yeah, and she's very good at that, but she's also feminine about it, right? So she's very loose and intuitive and goes, okay, this is what is right for him. She started sending him, like, we started doing swimming lessons, and then, he started doing this, and then started going to these other classes, and they've been super good for him. But I'm allowing her wisdom to emerge for him to do what she feels is right for him, absolutely supporting, what we need to do, driving places, all that sort of stuff, getting that done, finances, and all that sort of thing that I can help with, I help with. But at the moment, it's not for me to program in what the milestones are. Maybe down the track, once we get to that age, potentially around where your son is, things can shift, and at that point we'll approach things a little bit more differently, and sort of see hey, you want to take on, because even simple things I can see myself. In my childhood, I tried a billion different things, and some things I kept, some things I dropped. And I've got this thing in the back of my head, which is like, for my son, it's going to be like, dude, you can try anything you want, but you've got to give it 6 months. So I can already see myself setting milestones for him. It's like, really want to do singing? Do you really want to do singing? I really want you to do singing, but you got to do it for 6 months. You really got to know you want to do it for 6 months. You want to do, do you want to do, go karting? We
And
could
there's
totally
no
do go
way they
karting.
have
You
a
got to do it for six
concept
months.
of what is 6 months. They're like, is that like
Yeah,
a
right?
day?
So it can be as loose a milestone as that, but it also like gives them an opportunity because when you first try something, it sucks. Like I remember when I first picked up a clarinet, like when I was a kid, and yes, I played the clarinet as a kid. I did it for like 3 months and it sucked. And I was like, I suck at this. This sucks. And I'm like, this is not for me. Moved on to the violin, moved on to another instrument, and just never really got any traction. And I have such regrets around it because the guitar is the most one of the most special relationships I have in my life right now, as the djembe does, like this incredible drum and handpans. Like music is a massive part of my life, but I just shut down to it because I wasn't willing to commit. Because when you're a kid, your attention span, this everything's shiny, There's just so much in the world, But when you become an adult, that's probably one of the gifts of becoming an adult. There's like you can really feel what builds that romance in your life, and you can sort of invest and deepen into it with a little bit more maturity. But yeah, so that's the kind of stuff that I would think I would approach down the track.
But I think with like kids, like if some kid picks up the guitar and he is naturally good at it and he just wants to keep playing, like he won't notice the sucky part. Like there's things that I was obsessed about when I was a kid that it would probably have been sucky to someone else, but I didn't notice just because I was so obsessed with it,
Definitely. Definitely. Even like what we're doing right now, like conversation for some people sucks, but we love it, right?
I forgot what I was going to say.
Sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, no worries. Also, before the show, we were talking about, and it's such a coincidence that the emotion code came up for me last week. So again, my son, he's got fear of dogs, and I was like, how am I going to help him? Because it's kind of getting worse. We would go out to parks and there'd be these dogs around, and he would just freeze. And I was like, okay, I have friends that are hypnotists, maybe that could work. And then someone raised their hand. They're like, oh, I do emotion code work, and that'll be super easy. We'll just, clear that out and he'll be good to go. And so we had that a few days ago, and we haven't been out to the park yet, but it seems like I've talked to him and he's like, how do you feel about dogs? He's like, yeah, pretty good, I guess, So what's your experience since you brought that up? I thought it was kind of interesting that that's twice in a week
that it's circled around for you. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's interesting. Must be. Yeah, I did a podcast with Dr. Bradley very recently. I think it was actually 3 days ago. So the emotion code leading into a podcast, nice. I'm sure, as you know, you basically dive deep into the body of work that you're about to interview on to understand it better, to bring out obviously the best in the interview. I guess that's at least my process. But I've watched your episode, so yeah, I know you do your background work as well. So yeah, on that, it was it's interesting as well. If we zoom out for just a sec, I often find episodes come at the right time for me as well. Like, it just often just so happens with podcasting, it's this amazing vehicle for personal development because the right timing, the teacher appears, it's like, and the podcast is my school, basically. It's a school for me where I just get to share the lessons with everybody else, is the way I look at it. And so, it's this body of work like gentleness and emotional stuff, and all this stuff was just coming up. And it was like, okay, emotion code, and boom, I'm doing this interview with, and the beauty of it is I was really challenged by it initially because, he talks about, emotions can be trapped in your system for like decades. Like you could have got them before the age of 3, your subconscious mind retains all that information, but your conscious mind, is a terrible memory keeper. If I asked, those that are tuning in, what did you eat for dinner last Thursday? And it's like, crap for Thursday, you know, and it's like, that's your conscious mind, yeah. But your subconscious mind keeps a track of absolutely everything it's ever been exposed to. And this is a conversation that's not foreign at the Inspired Evolution. We've had Dr. Bruce Lipton on, you know, epigenetics and all sorts of conversations about the subconscious mind and how to basically reprogram it to basically support you doing things with greater ease. Yeah. My favorite metaphor is like, if your subconscious mind is the elephant, which it really is, it's 90% of your mind. Yeah. Moving north. Yeah. And your conscious mind, which is the ant on the elephant's back, that 10% is trying to head south. Like, which way are you actually heading? You know, and the ant's like, I'm going south. And it's like, are you really? You're on an elephant going north, bro. So yeah, it's realizing the importance of the subconscious mind and just all the stuff that it's holding. And then in the emotion code, he makes it really simple, which is, and this is probably what really sold me on it as much as it was the painful part of it, because the ego in me loves the complexity. It's like, it dropped, like, so I've been carrying this for like 20 years, this emotional thing of like, you know, whatever. And it's going to take, you know, a good 6 to 12 months, maybe 2 years to work on it as a body of work to get it out. And the emotion code is just like, okay, identify it. It was an emotional loop that didn't get closed out. Connect to it, ask it a bunch of questions. And honestly, I feel like him asking the emotion questions is just you spending more time with the emotion so you can really just sink into it. But he gets you to ask some questions around it. Mm-hmm. And kinesiology is something I believe in, which is obviously muscle testing, and that your body as a computer does speak to what feels strong and what feels sort of like what feels weak as a yes and a no. I think that is a bit of a prerequisite for you to be able to dive into the emotional code. For some people, they don't believe in kinesiology, so then that rules it out for them, I think. But I invite you to be open-minded about it. But you know, that's just a prerequisite. And from that space, so yeah, you've got to believe in muscle testing as a prerequisite for sure. And then one of the key things that from there is, and this is why I had so much resistance to it initially, was, you know, something you've been carrying for 30 years using EFT tapping, or, you know, basically, you know, swiping along your central meridian, you clear within about 30 seconds, something that you've been carrying for 30 years now. I'm definitely not an expert in this space. I've just done a podcast on this. And so, yeah, but I did a whole bunch of clearings on myself prior to going into the episode. And you can clear yourself of things, you know, of random things, like the things that you potentially like. I've had neck and shoulder pain for a while, and I was just like, I wonder what this is. And I was like, don't even wonder, like, just go in and go, what is there an emotion that's trapped in here? And it's like, oh, I got a yes for that. Okay, cool. Do I need to know more about it? No. Is this ready to be cleared? Yes. Okay, let's clear. And, you know, just going through the process and just trusting it. Now, it seems super woo-woo and super, yeah, like, because I know exactly how it sounds, because, again, I'm the engineer. Right? It's like, okay, so you're just going to basically stroke some Chinese medicine lines down your body, and you're going to clear stuff that you've been carrying for 30 years in 30 seconds. Sure, mate.
Too
you know,
easy.
And that's, yeah, do you know, exactly right. But again and again, you know, like being trained by Eckhart Tolle, the power of now is one of the most simple concepts, but it's not easy. Yeah, it's simple. Like now, just be here now. And then you're sitting there, and then your mind goes, do, 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 and you're like, oh, just be here now. Like, it's simple, but it's excruciatingly painful, and even more so because it's simple. It's like, I should be able to do this. Like, so yeah. So I appreciate the simplicity that it affords. Although, yeah, it seems super easy, but also like noticing the parts where, even though people have tuned into this and some of them know that they're carrying emotional baggage, still won't approach the body of work. And that's the hard part. See, it's simple, but the hard part is bringing yourself to it. Be here now. Meditation is actually quite simple. It's just sit and see what happens in many ways. But bringing yourself to it is the hard part. It's like giving yourself, like, I'm just going to sit. Yeah. So again, you've heard about this, and potentially for some of you, it's the second time, third time that you've heard about emotional stuff, emotional baggage, like, you know, you wanted emotional clearing from someone before you can do it all yourself. And now you've heard about it. Are you going to do it? Yeah.
To do it on yourself? Were you just following, I think there's a book, were you just going off the book, or what?
Yeah. So I read the book. But I realize there's YouTube videos online that you can just watch and you can just do it all yourself. Like all you need is really there's a PDF page and it tells you a flowchart of a series of questions to ask, and there's another because he's a computer programmer basically. He's got this other chart, and you look at the chart of emotions, and he gets you to narrow down using muscle testing for yourself. And this is where I said before, you need muscle testing as a prerequisite, and you can just sort of narrow down which emotion it is, and then you just go, okay, that's the emotion that I'm feeling, and that's trapped. Can I release it? And it goes, yep. Off you go.
Have you dug into the power versus force work of
yes,
Hawkins?
absolutely.
Because he
years ago
muscle testing a lot. And the thing that stuck, or one of the things that stuck with me, was that you have to be at a certain for muscle testing to even work or be reliable to give you, because you're asking basically like a yes or a no. For it to be reliable, you have to be at a certain emotional state of neutral or above. So like neutral to love versus like fear or shame. Something like that.
Yeah, it was an important, I think the exact metaphor that he uses in that book is about donuts. Actually, he goes, because if you're below a certain frequency and you're like, okay, and that sounds so judgmental, I apologize for that. But he goes, if you're below a certain frequency, this is how he puts it, you will, like you say, oh, do I want that? Do I need this donut? And you'll muscle test and you'll say yes, because you have a proclivity for donuts. Right? But once you've done a certain amount of work on yourself, you can go, do I want that donut? And you'll get the no. It's like, oh, okay, it's not the best thing for me.
Well, it's also
I actually do want the donut. It's like,
the question is important. Like, what are you actually asking? Like, because if you ask, do I want the donut? Like, yeah, I do want it, but is it in my best interest? Like.
Yeah.
So how much? So I think we're similar in that we sort of immerse ourselves in someone's work to bring them on the show. And you've done how many episodes have you done at this point?
Well over 200, 250, maybe a bit more. 5 years of podcasting every week, so 52 weeks a year. So well over 250 episodes now. So
and you've had some pretty significant guests on your show. Congratulations. And
Thank you so much.
And I'm curious about your process of what things, because some guests I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to use this information in my life or in my coaching. And some of it's like just kind of interesting. What's your process for sort of synthesizing what you're learning through the show and bringing it into your work?
Yeah, it's a big question. At the heart of it, what I feel you're asking me is, how do you embody 250 episodes worth of wisdom? And for me, that's a big ask. And I think the reality is certain conversations are affirmative. Like I'll hear them and they're just affirming something that is, oh, yep, that's exactly how I feel, and it's really important. That doesn't mean that I don't go along with the episode, sometimes playing the role of the novice, because as the interviewer, you've got to don a certain position in the conversation which elicits the best out of the interviewee, right? And so sometimes that means, okay, I know the answer to this, but if I was to pretend like I don't know the answer to this because it's going to serve my audience the best way, and I'm pretty transparent in my episodes, I say that, it's like, I know, I feel like I've got a bit of an answer to this, but I'm going to ask this anyway, and I just ask the question quite casually that way. So many episodes are affirmative, but then many episodes groundbreaking and revelatory. Due to the nature of my podcast, spiritual entrepreneurship, being at the heart of the inspired evolution. And also the format, like being on YouTube, like being video and visual, like I feel like even just what you and I are doing, like you get to connect with the other person relatively well. Obviously it's not like it's in person, but it's the next best thing. It really is. And so for me, having that visual component of it is quite breakthrough. Like for me, when I'm having that conversation with someone and the way they say something to me, not just like, the auditory version of it, it sinks home and it's like, whoa, and I've had some significant shifts thanks to the podcast. But being of spiritual nature, like those are the things that then usually the shift will happen, and then I will carry that into my integration. So that's where the podcast itself has elicited something really potent, and then I'll integrate that into my life as, using the art of contemplation fundamentally, but what I used to call rumination, chewing on the cud. You could just call it that. I would just, just continue to carry that piece of wisdom for a little while and just sort of chew on it, contemplate it, and see where to apply it, whether it's in my business, whether it's in my personality, whether it's in my character, whether it's in my relationships. And then oftentimes leading into a podcast, similar to what we were talking about the emotion code, like then in order to research a podcast, you do a whole bunch of work to sort of facilitate that conversation. And then there's a whole bunch of positive side effects that come from that. Oftentimes that is self-led. In some instances, it gets really exciting and inspiring because then you're like, okay, like this is going to be like, I've got a whole bunch of questions, or, in some instances it's like, okay, like this person is, they're really at the frontier of this particular thing and I'm out of my depth, but let's approach the conversation, from like a place where I don't know what I don't know, and hopefully that'll add some value. So the art of interviewing is, it's been a huge learning process for me, especially listening. That's been huge. But yeah, ultimately there's a lot of different ways that I've found the opportunity to embody what the wisdom from the podcast conversations have brought forth. And if I'm 100% honest with you, I don't embody everything. Some of it, like I listen back to some episodes going, whoa, that's still relevant. Like I'm still actually working on that, so dare I, not come across as the expert, because we're all on this journey and we're all figuring it out and we're all working on it together. And, it just, we touched on the gene keys earlier, I have a belief where everybody's here to learn a certain signature of lessons in this particular life. And so you'll find for those that are spiritually inclined that have been doing some work on themselves for a while, it's like the same lessons keep cropping up after like 5-7 years, like boom, that same one rears its head. And it's like, are you serious right now? Like I thought I addressed all that stuff. And then it's like, hey, I'm back. And it's like, oh man. But I just did all that. And that for me, affirms a little bit of that perspective that people have, which is, we signed up for the lessons that we wanted to learn in this human experience, because some people will argue that the human experience is like an experience of suffering. I choose not to lean into that too heavily for myself. My values are connection, contribution, celebration. So I look at life as a celebration. But yeah, there is that perspective on it. And so if you are here to suffer, then what is the suffering that you've enlisted for yourself for if you chose to be here empowered, ? What is that? And you may not know the answer to that, but your life is teaching you the answers to that, right? And so you go along with the journey and you allow the distillation of that process to occur.
When you have a guest or even a coaching client that's bringing something to you where you feel out of your depth and it makes you a little uncomfortable, how do you approach navigating that?
Yeah, so one of the really amazing touchwood assets of being a coach is that you meet some really incredible people on your way. Yeah, so having done 250 episodes, I've met more than 250 remarkable people. I've met thousands of remarkable people on my way. Facilitating retreats, workshops, seminars, like the people that are in the audience, oftentimes they're even more remarkable than myself giving the seminar. And you meet them and they become your friends. And so there's always someone to refer people onto, I have found. But my favorite place to refer people onto actually are books. Especially audiobooks. That's my favorite way of sort of learning. So I love referring people onto good books, and I'm just an avid reader. Like my Audible is one of the most expensive things in my life, but it's great because I can list it off as a business expense. But I'll smash through so many books. And the good part about that, especially when it comes to like a really dear coaching client of mine recently going through a whole bunch of stuff, and it was like, hey, like this is a book that you really need to read right now. So to be fully transparent, the book that she's reading, without going into her process, because obviously that's integrity, is Radical Self-Acceptance by Tara Brach. Incredible book. Now, I'm by no means an expert on self-acceptance. Yeah. I'm still working on the gentleness bit to sort of be nicer to myself. Yeah. And then that kindness will eventually, hopefully, transpire to self-love, which then, brings me home to acceptance. So I'm still on that journey. But that doesn't mean that I haven't got some clarity on what's the next best tool for that particular person. And then 2 days later, she writes the message. She goes, "Oh my God. In this 3.5-hour audiobook, I feel like every word she's saying, she's speaking to me." And I'm like, yeah, it's exactly where you're at, So oftentimes people feel like as a coach, you need to have the exact answer for what that person's needs from within you. And man, that is, I'll just speak my truth about it. I feel like that is the most foolish thing you could do as a coach. And I often say this to my coaching clients. I say this to every single coaching client when we start out. There's going to be at a point in this coaching journey where you're going to turn around to me and go, you're learning just as much from me as I'm learning from you. Why am I paying you? Yeah. And that moment happens. It happens every single coaching journey. Because I don't show up as the coach that goes, "Hey, this is what you need to do." Remember, we're talking about goals and milestones. This is what you need to do. Let's go. And I'm just like cracking the whip. It's like, "Hey, I'm your brother walking by your side. And I'm willing to have those conversations that are really important to have, but you never have with anybody." Right? Whether it's emotional, whether it's spiritual, whether it's, in the 3D, whether it's about, how you're leading your team, whether it's about how you show up for this one other person in your life, like those conversations are really important to you, but you're not having them anywhere. Yeah, so I will go there with you. And oftentimes I'm just holding your hand going down the rabbit hole, and I've never been down the rabbit hole myself. And we're both going down there, but we've got the safety of each other going down that rabbit hole together. So we've got just that little bit more courage. And we'll go there and go, "Whoa, like what's going on down here?" Okay. And we learn and we unpack. And it's the depths that we go to are just so much more profound than me doing what most other coaches, and, this is not what every coach does, but most other coach, they've got an answer in the back of their head, and they're just asking you leading questions to that answer in the back of their head so that you can own that answer as your own, because the leading questions were there and you go, "Oh, I own, like that's the same answer." But what I'm doing there is just creating another Amrit. But you're not an Amrit. We're all the universe looking in on ourselves. We're all unique expressions of life. That is one of the greatest service I could do to you. It's like, "Oh yeah, just do things how I do things." Absolutely freaking not. If there are things that I do that are valuable for you, that you can learn from, absolutely, I'm an open book. I'll share what I've done to implement my business. But for some people, scaling is having a $2,000 programming, $2,000 coaching course and serving it to 2,000 people. For some people, like myself, it's like having a $20,000 coaching offering and serving to 5 people. Now, both are equally as fruitful, right? But one size does not fit all, because I like the depth of conversation. Some people like impacting heaps of other people. Like, it's up to you how you approach it, right? But we'll go into those conversations open-minded, open-hearted, exploring together to sort of see what can emerge. And that's what I love doing the most. So instead of trying to just program a million other Amrits or a billion other Amrits, I'd rather just go down, you being you. So like me having that conversation with Derek and going, "Who is Derek? What's Derek's story? Like, what's it for Derek?" And Derek going, "I'm not even sure." And it's like, "Well, I'm not even sure either, but let's go there." And then from there, like certain parts of listening is like, "Oh, I've seen this trend before. Such and such that I coached, or such and such that I podcast was of this proclivity, or, was inclined this way. Does that resonate for you? Yes or no?" Yes. Okay. Interesting. Does that mean X, Y, and Z for you? And it's like, "Oh, actually, yeah, it does." Okay. So where do you go from here? And then they go, "Well, the next effective step," which is something that I always coach. Well, the next effective step, like, because oftentimes people are like, "I want clarity before I even get started." You get clarity in the doing. It's like one of my biggest mantras, because I was like that, paralysis by analysis. I suffered from it big time. And so these are the little things that I'll pepper in on their journey. It's like, don't be paralyzed by analysis. Like, clarity is in the doing. What do you want to do? So there's that little bit of encouragement that I'll afford you. Absolutely. And for some people, that's everything. Yeah. But nonetheless, it's your inspirations that are guiding you on your evolution, not mine. And the thing that helps me draw breath, inspire, is not going to be the exact thing that animates you to draw breath and inspire, which is the beauty of it all.
Have you Have you noticed any shifting trends in, and I'm thinking more about the speaking roles that you do, or like when you encounter like groups of people, but like in the last few years, what are people focusing on more or needing help with more, that's changing?
Yeah, big time. So one of the great question, by the way, and especially being a coach, one of the things, because yeah, as lean as my coaching client, like now you like apply to get coaching, which is great. But like I used to coach 50 people at a time. And especially when that was going on, watching recurrent themes emerge in people's systems was like, and 50 people one on one, yeah, not like 50 people just kind of in a group. It was like 50 people one on one and watching like, man, like 30 to 50% of the people are all getting lessons on surrender right now. Like
Mm-hmm.
there must be, and again, I don't see myself as an astrologist in any way, even though I'm a Jinkies coaching guide. I'm like, there must be something going on in the stars. I don't know. Like, I don't know. But something's up because these people are all over the world. Yeah. Like Japan, Mexico, USA, Canada, Australia. So, like, but collectively, we're all going through learning a bunch of lessons, like at the same time. Bit trippy, huh? So, yeah, there is that sort of collective. One of the big trends since I've been a speaker, when I first started speaking, and maybe that's just due to the nature of a speaking career, but there does feel like there's been a bit of a shift. I'm by, again, no mean an astrologist or an expert in this, but the way I've heard some of my mentors speak to this is, they said the Mayan calendar ended at a certain point, not too far across from where the age of Aquarius sort of started. And again, these are both topics of conversation which I'm completely out of my depths on, yeah. But the timing of these things, that people that are in those fields have spoken to me about, coincides with this what felt like bringing the conversation of spirituality and integrating it into 3D. Because at the end of the day, that's what I'm focused on, right? Spiritual entrepreneurship. Making sure that whatever you're leading, whatever you're creating, you're doing so from an aligned place, a place aligned to spirit, thing that really brings you lots of great amounts of joy and vitality. Yeah, that felt like it was more of an uphill battle when I first started, but then it tipped around those times where it was like, oh, everybody's having these conversations, and it was buzzing me out because it went from, okay, like, even just something simple, and by no means if you eat organic food are you woke, but you understand certain principles if you're invested, if you're that way and sort of inclined. So before there was like one or two organic shops in the whole of Melbourne, and now there's one in like every suburb.
Mm.
Yeah. So those little things have really just gone, oh, there's been a shift. Yeah. Like I don't have to travel that far to find people that are tuning into the same conversation. Now, I found that to be like I'm previously it was like running uphill to sort of have this conversation around how important it is, to make sure that what you're creating is in alignment with your spirit. And to be honest, when I say that, it sounds super esoteric, but the reality of it is I just give a shit about your mental health. I struggled with depression for 6 years because I was out of alignment with my values. So I know what that wreaks on you. Like I've been there, and I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy. Like depression is, to say it sucks is even, and so to go into that space and go, actually, like there is a reason that you're here. What is the meaning to your life? What is the purpose? And in many ways, you're already doing it by being here. It's not something that you have to go looking for. It's already happening. But can you connect to it, connect to the meaning of your life, and continue to foster that and align to that and really deepen and nurture that relationship? Because from that place, you have purpose and your health is exuberant from that place, versus from the place where you have no purpose and no meaning and you're battering around, and then you're trying to ask the question, you're just more frazzled, and then you're completely disoriented and depressed. Like it's worlds apart, those two things. And that's, really what I'm here to facilitate is the conversation around health is purpose, purpose is health. If you don't give a shit about your purpose, doesn't matter, but give a shit about your health. Find your alignment, find your calling. What are the things that you're here for? Now that sounds huge, but for me, it's as simple as my values are connection, contribution, celebration. It's really, that's what I'm here to do. So in a podcast, do I get to connect? Yes. Do I get to contribute? Hopefully. Do I get to celebrate? Derek's laughing. I'm laughing. It seems like we're celebrating all right. Yeah. In a coaching call, do I get to connect? Absolutely. We go super deep. Do I get to contribute? Absolutely, I do. Do we get to celebrate? Ultimately, yes. Celebrate life. Speaking engagements, do I get to connect to an audience? Absolutely. So many of them. Contribute. Yes, absolutely. And then celebrate. Definitely. So it sounds way more woo-woo, but when you start to integrate it, maybe that's, me being the engineer, or maybe my purpose being the obscurity, clarity, light thing, so you feel lighter, but, yeah, it's super clear. It's like these three things are the things that are the pillars of the temple that are me. As long as I'm showing up for these things, I'm in joy, I'm in my purpose. And it just so happens that, like right now, technically, I'm marketing for my business. Because I'm on a podcast with someone else. Now it doesn't feel like that at all. I'm hoping those that are tuning in don't get that vibe from me, right? Because it doesn't feel like that for me at all. I'm just having a conversation. I'm getting to connect, I'm getting to contribute, I'm getting to celebrate. I'm just doing the things that I was put here to do, and I love it, right? Now, there are things that you are here to do, right? That inform what is your story and your purpose. And if you can connect to that, your life is just going to be so much richer, like so much richer. And I know that firsthand from my own experience.
This is good stuff. This maybe a good place to kind of wrap things up. That was like a very inspiring, punchy little segment you just did. But maybe is there anything I haven't asked you about that you want to share about your work, or what you're into these days? It's up to you.
It's there's so much. Like I said, like we talked earlier on, and one of the occupational hazards of being a podcaster, I guess, is that every week you're interviewing someone interesting, and so it's like what do you focus on? It's like, oh, how do I give you an arrow directed towards a target rather than a fireworks display? So yeah, there's a lot going on in my world, in my ecosystem, but yeah, we talked. We talked a lot about purpose, which is fundamentally what is the conversation that I'm most inspired by and here to facilitate. The work that I currently do as a coach is helping people pivot on purpose, conscious career change / follow your calling. Live your purpose is at the heart of that. So how to actually pivot and come aligned to, what really calls to you. And I know the term spiritual entrepreneurship alienates a lot of people. Intrapreneurship is also just as amazing, right? And leading from the inside out within organizations. So plenty of the people that I work with are intrapreneurs. So it's just about creating that alignment within yourself so that you can unlock and find your journey, whether it's being an entrepreneur, whether it's being an intrapreneur, or otherwise, right? So that's been the work I've been facilitating for the last, I would say, 6 years. 5.5 years. And then recently, the last couple of years, a lot of the people that I was working with have actually made that shift, and then also are now leaders within organizations or leading their own. They've become founders, they've become creators. And in there, we've continued the coaching journey, which has continued to surprise me, but to some degree. But then that's just meant that I'm here as a leadership coach now, sort of keeping leaders aligned throughout their journey, helping them with the decision making, helping them with, how do I hire a team, what should I be, putting out in the world, and just, being in that person's corner, having again those deep and meaningful conversations that they don't get to have with other people. It's an incredible blessing. So fundamentally, purpose and leadership coaching is what I'm up to. You can find me and more on that on amrit.coach is the website, www.amrit.coach. And as always, the podcast comes out every week. Not too dissimilar to what Derek's up to in the world. Love your podcast, rather. So www.youtube.com/inspired evolution. Weekly doses of inspiration for your evolution.
All right. Well, great hanging out with you again today, Amrit. And it's been fun. Thank you.
Such a pleasure, bro. Thank you so much for having me again. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Bye-bye.